Did it again. I think I got the problem solved. I had to copy a bunch of documents to send to my lawyer, and I forgot I had like 27 documents in HD on my memory, and it wasn't on the camera memory. It went to the file. Well, that counts too, so I was out of memory. But I cleaned all that off. I got them all right here now, so we should be good. Let's see. Cultural artifacts, the things of the past that people can see, and they see more than they think they see. You know, all their training and their education. Those were built by troglodytes. They were stupid and they disrespected women and gays. And life was brutal and short back then. We have science now, so we're better. But they look at the stuff, especially something like a machine, like a car. Yeah, they need to get rid of all that stuff. They want to get rid of all the communication with the past. I've got a box. Oh, you can probably see it from here. There's an ammo box back there. That one, it's pretty big. It's stuffed. You know what it's stuffed with? Letters and pictures. A lot of letters and documents from my family going all the way back to the 1880s. People were pretty clever back then. I've read all of them. They're in beautiful cursive. They had very subtle sense of humor, very polite, very good-natured. I think a lot of college students couldn't read them. High school students, most American high school students, well, they don't even teach them cursive anymore, do they? They don't want them to read cursive because they could read that kind of stuff and see what people's attitudes were, how free they were 100 years ago, 120 years ago, 140 years ago. I got letters that are 140 years old in there for my great uncles and so on and so forth and whatnot. And they had interesting lives. Family stories, some old newspaper articles. You know why? They could do whatever the freaking hell they wanted to. I mean, within limits. I mean, as long as it was something good, as long as they weren't hurting anybody or bothering anybody, they could think up some way to make money and they'd do it. A way that was good, that something that people wanted. For instance, my great-grandpa, I gotta explain something. The generations really stretch out of my family. I was in my 50s before I had my son. My dad was pushing 50 when I was born. His dad was in his 50s when he was born. So when I say my great-grandpa, I'm not talking about a World War I veteran. I'm talking about a veteran of the Indian Wars. He left home because it was during Reconstruction. There wasn't much opportunities in eastern Tennessee. He went out west, had some adventures, worked as a scout. That wasn't a prestige job like they portray it on TV. He was the only white scout for his unit. All the others were blacks and renegade Indians. It was a very low-level position. He got in a little trouble because he didn't want to get killed. And he went on out to Idaho, started a cattle buying operation. He noticed all the cowboys spent all their money on beer and women, so he started a saloon, a gambling house. My uncle, who died several years ago in his 80s, he remembered him because he lived to his 90s. He's 93 years old when he died, my great-grandpa. My uncle told me some of the stories that great-grandpa, his grandpa told him. Yeah, he was pretty witty. He ran a gambling house and saloon to get his money back from the cattle buying operation. No, you can be judgy and say that's evil or whatever, but no, somebody's going to get it. He used to tell my uncle, gambling is an ignoble profession and not a very good pastime. And an ace cuts better if you wax it. Yeah, he's a pretty clever guy. Anyway, he noticed there's all these wild horses running around in Idaho. And he had cowboys that worked for him and servants and everything. He had some money, so he got an idea because he knew what they sold for in Tennessee. He hired some cowboys, Mexican cowboys. He had a retinue of Chinese servants, and they moved the family from Idaho to Tennessee. They drove 2,000 head of horses with them and sold them along the way. A good Mustang in Tennessee at that time would fetch as high as $500 if it looked right. And he got them for free, and he had 2,000 of them to start out with. I think it took them 2 years, if I remember correctly, but they got to the Mississippi River and the federal government came down and stopped them. Yeah, we're beginning to see some interference here. This was 1900. In 1900, he got to the Mississippi River, and they met him with federal troops and said, "You're not crossing this river with those horses." Seems the horse trading lobby in Tennessee is pretty powerful. That's the way government works. Oh, they said the reason, he demanded a reason for it. He just interfering with his lawful business. And he says, well, there's a pandemic. There's a horse pandemic, and we don't want you spreading diseases in the east of the Mississippi. No, it wasn't a pandemic. If there was, it's one that they created in the news because they knew he was coming. My family has got a history of getting shot down like that, but we always keep trying. I have no income. I'm living in a little room here. Somebody allowed me to for free. Charity. Well, I'm helping them out a little bit. I'm going to keep trying, though. I'm not trying to get rich. I'm just trying to do what's right. And if enough people do what's right, then you can do things that other people want. And, it would have been good to have all those horses going into Tennessee. Would have dropped the price of good horses a little bit. That's what they didn't want. Anyway, I had a point I was going towards, and I went off on a rabbit trail. Sorry. Oh, yeah. These people that lived back then. My dad was raised by a man who left the Amish community. He went to do his wilding and did some gambling and made some money. He had some people hunting him down because he won money from them. All kinds of adventures. And he married a nice Dutch girl and went down to Arkansas. There weren't any Amish communities where he went. He went to a kind of a boom town where there was a lot of logging activity and settled in with a store and a logging operation. Ran some cattle, lived in town, did pretty well for himself. He still practiced Amish ways, but he wasn't part of the community, so he technically wasn't Amish, I guess. Anyway, my dad's mother died and his father was kind of a character, so he was dropped off with his aunt. That was the nice Dutch girl. They raised my dad there. But that guy that raised my dad, he raised a lot of kids. A lot of people would have a parent would die or something, the other wasn't around or couldn't handle them, and he'd take them in and put them to work. Yeah, he put them to work. It was good for them. They all loved him. They had a place for him to stay, a warm bed, good food, found things for him to do. He raised my uncle. My uncle's father was murdered. He was 14. He went and stayed with him for a while. He told me some stories. Says, your uncle, well, we called him great uncle. He was actually, he would have been my dad's uncle. Okay. He could make money out of anything. My uncle, when he was a kid, 14, 15, he was in the woods and a herd of hogs came after him. Hogs are pretty dangerous. They run around in big packs and they will go after you. And they can tear you to pieces. He climbed up a tree and he had his little 22 and they wasn't leaving. So he tried everything. They just wouldn't leave him alone. They stayed around that tree and they wouldn't go away. So he popped some shots off. That didn't scare him. So he shot one of them. He reached down and got it right between the eyes and dropped it. The rest of them didn't get the message. He spent half a day in that tree and finally ended up killing all those hogs with a 22. 9 of them. Sounds like a crazy, outrageous story, but you ask anybody that grew up back in the 30s and 40s in the woods in Arkansas, they can tell you stuff like that. But anyway, he made a mistake of going back home and telling Uncle Elmer about that. Well, we got some work to do. He got a wagon got his tools, and they went out there and they dressed every one of them hogs, and then they hauled him to town and sold all the meat. Don't let anything go to waste. Can you do stuff like that now? No, somebody won't let you. Some parasite that gets paid to obstruct everything won't let you, because somebody might do something dirty or not do it right, and then somebody will get sick, so we don't let anybody do it. Your meat industry regulations all came from a novel written at the turn of the century by Upton Sinclair called Urban Jungle, I think it was. And it told about the meat industry in Chicago and how dirty it was, and people died, and people fell in the grinder and went into the sausages. It was propaganda. He probably got paid by certain meat packers to write that so they could pass legislation and they could get on the board to regulate the competition out of business. And it exists to this day, the FDA. People read that book and, rats running around and falling into the grinders. That's crazy. That's not how they did things, even in the big meatpacking industry in Chicago. And people dying. If you look at statistics, there weren't really all that much of a problem with food poisoning back then because people were smart. I first came here, the other end of Crimea. We'd go to the meat market that my wife liked, and I'd go in there, and they're butchering, they're bringing in dead pigs and cow parts, quartered cows and stuff, and they're cutting pieces out of them in this big room with lots of windows and open doors, no screens on the windows. There's dudes wearing, Russian army shirts and smoking cigarettes while they're cutting up the meat. There's dogs running in and out, and they're, throwing scraps to them. It was great. I mean, that's just how they did things here. They still do in some places. Nobody got sick. Nobody had any problem. You knew to be careful with the meat that you bought. There are a bunch of idiots that don't know how to do things. That doesn't mean that all of society has to change and turn into an industrial, chemical-based, regulations-based mega factory that controls all the food, because that's what it's become. A lot of Americans don't know it, but eggs, if you wash eggs and then put them in a refrigerator, they have a shorter shelf life than if you just leave them natural and leave them out. In Europe, it's illegal to wash eggs and then sell them because they have a protective coating on them when they come out of the chicken that preserves them at room temperature. Well, why would industry make a law that you have to wash eggs and put them in a refrigerator? Because they don't keep as long? Do they care about your safety? No, they want to sell more freaking eggs. Everything is totally on its head. Everything. Everything they make is just chintzy crap that's designed to dissolve and fall apart. You remember the old telephones, the old black telephones that you'd get from Ma Bell when you subscribed, and it belonged to the telephone company? You ever seen how well made those things were? They were indestructible. They called them all back when the little cell companies got going. You had to turn in your phones. They went to a landfill, I think, most of them. They don't want people seeing how they're made. They don't want people seeing the quality, the intricate quality, and the thick metal, and all the craftsmanship that went into those phones made back in the 50s and 40s. I found some at a landfill when I was a young man. I don't know. They started replacing them with the newer phones. I remember it wasn't the cell. It's when the touch tones came out, and you could buy a touch tone phone, and you could pick your provider for plug-in phones. This would have been, I guess, in the early '80s, maybe. Yeah, I found a bunch of old Ma Bell black phones in a landfill, and I took some of them apart and looked at them, and they were pretty interesting. They were unbelievably well made. It was like a giant Swiss watch. They do that now, anywhere, anything? Maybe for some of the military equipment, that's about it. Everything else you're going to get It's designed to degrade and disintegrate and not last very long. Consumables. That's why you learn nothing and be happy. They want you wearing paper clothes. I think that was one of the things in 1984. I think it was in Brave New World, if I remember correctly. Yeah, people buy disposable clothes. You don't have to wash them. And then it becomes socialized, and disposable clothes will be provided for people in order to solve the clothing crisis. That's how they do it. And you take the bait. Oh, things will be so much nicer and easier. And you're enslaving yourself, and it's been a process for many years. Well, how do you reverse the process? You can't. The black pill people say we can't. They're too powerful. And then people have been convinced by their pastors that everything will be okay. You just wait for the rapture. You know, lay there in your Barca lounger and wait for, Jesus to take you home while you're watching soft porn on Netflix. No, you're supposed to be fighting. You're supposed to be doing something. You're supposed to be resisting this at least. I think you can go beyond resisting it, though. I'm going to put a link in here. Now, I got the Uncle Tony link. That's a pretty nice thing. It just tells you where average, normal people's heads are at. Well, non-academics. I mentioned, I think, in the last video about us mechanical philosophers. When the war with Russian operation was brewing, when NATO got the Ukrainians to put hundreds of thousands of troops around the Donbass and close in on them and send NATO weapons and advisors. And then, of course, all you see in the news is about how Russia's amassing its army on the border. Back when that was happening, it's when I came back here, because I knew, okay, it's getting ready to go off, and I want to be trapped here, not there. In the U.S., I want to be trapped here if I'm going to be trapped somewhere. So I came home, for good or for ill. And I had meetings. I was invited because my friend John Mark Dugan told them about me. That I've been blogging about this stuff since 2014, and I studied it and I knew a lot about it, and I wanted to tell the truth. I wanted to fight the information war, and I got to speak in front of the Russian Civic Chamber, the Russian Federal Civic Chamber, and I got to meet some luminaries and some philosophers, and then I got to have meetings where we could discuss ideas about how to fight this information war, because Russia didn't even hardly fight it. Ukraine spent probably your tax money and IMF money, but billions of dollars on 150 private PR firms working in conjunction with MI6 and the CIA to come up with this propaganda campaign. That's why you saw these fools waving the little blue and yellow murder puppet flags around. I support Ukraine. It's just an extension of people. It's the same thing. You and me, we don't buy that. And they try to censor us and shut us off and squeeze us out and not let us make money. Now we need to fix that, and we can. Uncle Bildy's got some plans, some ideas. Oh, I get to talk to these academics, these people who are political philosophers, and some of them I greatly respect. And they're all Eurasianists, and it's all good. And I says, I got a website. And I started the YouTube channel. What was it? Oh, this one, Uncle Bildy. John Mark doing kind of encouraged me to do it and got it going. And we're talking to these people and saying, what I want to do, where I want to take this, and I'm going to change my website. It was originally for homesteading, and I was going to show how Russians with their dachas homestead, because there's a lot of Americans can learn about it. And I think, mixing ideas is really good sometimes, not cultural. I mean, it's technology for self-sufficient homesteads, home manufacturing, etc. That was my ambition. I said, okay, I'm going to have to turn it into a political magazine. And I did. And I'm talking to these people, and they're like, Uncle Bildy? What is that? Who's going to listen to Uncle Bildy, making things? It's like they couldn't get their head around it. Oh, people only listen to academics. People only want to listen to people that have been to university. They weren't really snobs about it, but I could tell that they're having a problem with this. Why you want to be Uncle Bildy? Why you want to talk about building stuff? Where we need the political philosophy and ideology, and they're right, you do. But they're kind of short on marketing, really. Anyway, unclebildy.com is turned into a political magazine, but I'm going to start introducing another program into it. I'm going to go back to homesteading. I'm helping some people right now build a house here, and I know all about this stuff, the way Russians do things. It's fascinating. It's not necessarily superior. It's not necessarily worse, though, either. But it's different. The way they're organized, though, with buying dacha land and building your place, there's a lot of advantages to it. In America, you got way, way too much regulation. You can't do anything unusual. I think Texas is probably about the only state in the union where you can find unregulated land. If it's not incorporated into a city or a village, it's yours and you can do what you want. They can't permit stuff. They don't have the authority to. But then they make these phony associations that control stuff, and they'll take you to court, and they got more money than you, so they'll win. I think New Hampshire might have had some way where you can have land and not have to worry about inspections and zoning. Zoning was illegal as per the Texas Constitution, if I remember correctly. But, it's hard to find a place unless you go out west. West Texas, yeah, you can buy land cheap there and build a homestead and do whatever you want. But the water's 2,000 feet down. It's just basically a flat plain. It's nothing but gravel. Some places a blade of grass doesn't even grow in it. You can do it, but you gotta have a little money. And you're living around desert rats, which are usually, they don't like strangers coming in. They want to control the whole territory, not just what they own. Run into neighbor problems a lot. But anyway, we can reverse that. People should have the right to build their own place the way they see fit, the way they want to, and just have a simple, minimal inspection to make sure it's not going to fall apart or hurt the neighbor's property. Very simple. You don't have to have all these Better Homes and Gardens people determining what color to paint your trim and what kind of plants you can have in it. It's already gone that far in some places. And then the building inspectors are almost always from a family of contractors in the area. They don't like you doing stuff for yourself. They think that's money out of their pocket. Even if they don't want to do it, they don't want you to do it. And so they get kind of nasty. I got stories about that too. Some of the regulations they come up with are just so obviously criminal. Me and another guy had a business in Colorado. It was his business. I was helping him with it. And we had to deal with the inspectors and the regulations. We got almost done, and they come and said, you have to have 25 parking spaces for this business. There wasn't anywhere near that much room. Oh, that's okay. We have a system for dealing with that. So they had a program where you could lease parking spaces on the other side of town to make you legal. Guess who owned all those extra spaces? People on the village board. And a lease had to be for at least 50 years, so it's kind of pricey. They wanted you to lease a parking space on the other side of town for 50 years in order to start your business. These people belong in freaking jail. I'll tell you where it was, too. Canyon City, Colorado. They're probably still in power. They belong in jail. They need to be thrown in freaking jail. What they're doing is criminal. What most village boards and the people that come up with and city administrators and aldermen or whatever you have, a lot of what they do is criminal. It seems like the whole layer from the small town on up, all your regulations, all your government, oh, they're nice people. They have children and they're grandmothers and they're very pleasant and everything, but they're freaking criminals. They are here too. There's a way to get around all that. There's a way to start making it happen. You got to start with an ideology. Yeah, that's where you start. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Without an ideology, everything falls apart because everybody becomes a freaking cowboy and goes off in their own directions, and they want to argue about everything. There's a simple ideology. That's the framework, the foundation. And then from there, you can build platforms and you can protect them. You can have rights. You need a Bill of Rights. You should be able to build your own thing on your own property with nobody interfering with you if it doesn't interfere with anybody else's place. There can be places for nice, beautiful homes and secure neighborhoods, but there needs to be places where you can build a mud freaking hut and live in it if you want to. It's nobody's business. You should have the right transportation. You could build what you want. Get it inspected. Yeah, it's safe. It's got brakes. You know, it works. There's nothing wrong with this. You shouldn't have to license it either. It should be yours to use for the rest of your life if you want. And if it lasts that long, why not? You have to have a license to operate it. Well, you prove your competency. It should be lifelong. You should be subject to a local board. I mean, if you get really old and senile and can't drive and start running into things, there should be people that can stop you nicely. But this huge overweening federal government with hundreds of thousands of parasites and little do-gooders and nosy old women making up regulations for everything they see, and a lot of times it's just to put money in their pocket, and sometimes the really stupid ones is for nothing but their own ego, and you have to be subjected to it. No, it needs to be taken off. They're even starting to interfere with your children and your own physical body. When are you going to do something about it? Uncle Billy's putting together platforms and programs. The beginning, I'm not very tech savvy, and I'm kind of in a, I can't buy an office and sit in it all day doing this stuff. I have an extremely chaotic life, but I'm doing it. I hope that inspires some people. I got some ideas. I'm going to start putting homesteading stuff back on the website. I haven't paid much attention to my website anyway. I've just been feeding in some of my articles, but I need to get busy on that. I'm going to have a lot of photographs in the future. And I wanted to walk people through something. If you can get some land, here in Russia, a bunch of people can get together and they can go to an area where there's plenty of land for free. It's Russia. There is lots of places like that. And you can petition to lease a place from the government to have a village. Tim Kirby knows about all that stuff. Go to his site. It's fascinating. Hardcore Russia, Tim Kirby. He's got channels. I think, I don't know where he wants people mainly to be. He's got a YouTube channel. And then he's got Rumble, I think. I'll put some links. But with instructions, anybody can do this. Anybody. And a bunch of people that are friends and family can get together and help each other. You can make a magnificent place where everybody can live and make money. And you have chickens, you can do gardening, you can have a productive garden, you can have greenhouses, you can have home manufacturing where you can come up with some part that somebody needs or maybe coordinate. If there's a platform on the internet for building things, we need switches. We need servos, we need lifters, we need crankshafts, camshafts, and you can bid on all this stuff. And home manufacturing, you can make these parts. If you're flexible enough, you can make a lot of different things and go to whichever one is making the money and needed. Flexible, home-based, decentralized manufacturing. You have the technology for it. You can make better stuff than the Chinese are making. And then people can buy this stuff, bid on it, and put them together and make machines. They can make motors. They can make, tooling. They can make all kinds of stuff. They can make. You have to start out with something simple like household items that don't break and fall apart like these stupid outlets. Towel racks, for crying out loud. I stay in hotels in the U.S. and it seems like all the towel racks, if you put a wet towel on them, no matter how gingerly, it breaks it. They're made out of paper-thin, really crappy Chinesium alloy. And it's just the bare minimum to make the structure. And they're held into drywall with tiny little screws. There's no way that can hold a freaking towel, and yet they put them in there. I guess they think they can charge you for it if you break it. And they just have some poor guy going in and changing them and fixing them all the time. Why not just stick a piece of freaking rebar in the ground in the wall and have some something that doesn't have rust on it maybe. But if I built a house, it'd have a towel rack that you could do pull-ups with, and you never have to worry about it. Get you some land. Come up with a legal way to get land cheaply by cooperating with other people and even getting political and going into an area and putting key people in positions. And then you can build you a community and do what you want. And planning that, the first thing you do, you can need a driveway, right? You could put a cistern and a driveway in and put a little temporary building or a tent there and work out of that and go back in it and get the things in order that what you need. Maybe wind-powered air compressor, and then you got air power, and you can run everything off that. And you can make your bricks, you can do your concrete. Put a kiln in there, you can make anything you want. I'll show you how to do it. I know how to do all this stuff. I'm going to start putting it on my site and being a consultant and putting manuals together for it. You can make America great again from the very bottom, from the ground up. I used to be fascinated by these books I would find in the library, written in the 1890s through the 1920s. That was the heyday of it. How to build a foundry. So some sharp man who has some reading comprehension and some math skills could read this book, and they're elegantly written, and it'll tell you exactly how to make a big foundry that can eventually evolve into a commercial foundry making castings. The metal recipes, the sand recipes, how to lay it out where it's efficient, what you have your workers doing, your molding tables and your furnaces and what kind of coal to get. Everything, how to test it, how to wring stuff out, all the details, a book about that thick, and there are all kinds of books like that. And I read a lot of them just for amusement. I don't think they had books like that in Europe very much. I've never heard of them. That's why America exploded into an industrial giant, and it was done from the grassroots, from the ground up. And then the bankers started getting control of it one piece at a time. And the bankers and billionaires took it all over and warped it, turned it into what it is now. And the parasites, bankers, parasites, billionaires, and parasites, I mean most unnecessary regulators, they all work together. You can find something to manufacture that's a pleasure to do, and you can get a good living out of it on your own property if you don't have to pay mortgages and pay the bankers and pay rent, reasonable taxes. You shouldn't even have to pay those. Well, anyway, I'll put links to something inspiring. I want to fire people up. I'm not going to get too technical on this with the links, but I want people to be inspired that they can do that and to start laying the groundwork. You can't just go do it. If you just go do it, somebody will stop you. The neighbors won't like what you're doing, or there'll just be some bitter old hag that looks out the window and sees, oh, what are they doing over there? I'm going to call the police. And then they send their regulators on you and they stop you. No, you got to think about it, and you got to get everything all every I dotted and every T crossed. You got to think about it, and then you got to start out right. First thing to do is you need an ideology, and then you need to go from there to a Bill of Rights, and then you got to start going for it. And it can come together fast, but people need to organize. Enough people organize in a place where it's a little weak, where they don't have a stranglehold on everything, or a place where that stranglehold is getting ready to fall apart. They're going to put something else in its place that sounds better, but it still has the same parasites bleeding the system. Maybe everything needs to totally collapse. The last Great Depression, people had chicken houses in their backyards, and they didn't send the health inspectors, oh, that's against the regulations, you can't do that. If people are starving, yeah, good luck with that. I need to get some manuals ready. I need to make some videos along the lines of how to do things. Americans do things in construction that are just a little bit too fussy, especially when you see the way they do things around here. It works out fine. You're horrified when you see Russians doing concrete the way they do it on a dacha. But there's reasons why they do it like that. And it works just fine. Anyway, I'll end this right now. This is a 3-part series because of my technical problems. But we just call this good enough, and then we'll go to something else in the next video. But I'm going to be working on platforms, political strategies, ideology. I've been neglecting geopolitical George, but I got really frustrated with just the way the messages are presented. Going to have to start from scratch on that one too. Anyway, there's a real inspiring lake down here I want you to look at. It's a fighter, literal fighter. He explains everything real well. It's a must read. Uncle Bildy signing out.